Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's Grief Talk, and we are going to have lunch with you. Please invite your friends, grab your lunch, because today is a very, very special day. But before I tell you why it's so special, my name is Jennifer Tom.
And I'm Darlene Rampel.
Yes, and we're excited today. Darlene, you're having tea, and I'm having
Coffee.
You're having coffee, I'm having Timmy's because I'm on the road and I could not miss Grief Talk for anything. So I pulled over, grabbed a coffee, and I am ready. Please grab your notebook because our guests to this afternoon, you will just blow your socks off. Just wait. But before we go any further, we are just so thankful for this month of November. It has been a month about talking about the power of courage, and we have learned so much. Darlene and I have learned so much from our guests, from our you friends, from your comments and participation. And we just want to say thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And today, as we close the month, we have a big surprise. And before we go any further, because it's going to be amazing, I'm just wondering if Darlene could share.
Actually, I just have to let you keep sharing. I'm just going to be right back.
Okay. That's good. That is, we're gonna figure this out. But I'm just gonna have the courage to share about my friend who has joined us today. Her name is Annette, and we'll have a bio. We'll tell you all about her, but I just want to share a personal story. Through my path of life and my loss and my challenges and life events, Annette crossed my path. And she became my coach, is somebody I call, and there is no shame about, she's like my therapist, let's put it that way. But she's somebody I call, she's my confidant. And with our friendship and our relationship with Annette, it's changed my life. And so when we show up and say, find someone you can trust to share things, this is my person. And Annette does not fix. She listens with a heart, with ears, and she just shares her wisdom because she has gone through stuff that we've all gone through, whether it's loss, is disappointment, frustration. She just holds your hand and talks and listens. And that, so that today I'm just so excited to have her on our stage of Grief Talk to talk to us because she changed my life. There are times when I'm frustrated. There are times where I've had a loss. There are times where things don't go right. And I phone and she's always there with her heart that has ears. Anyway, I'm not going to say so much because I could just cry. But please, I hope that you can have courage to find that person, to find that person who can listen, to find that person that you can confide with. Because when you release, you're not stuck in the pain. That is all recovery. And we need to heal. And we heal by sharing, we heal by telling somebody because secrets make us sick. Darlene, are you back?
I'm back.
Okay, perfect. I'll let you share the quote, Darlene.
Okay, so the quote, and I'm sorry I didn't have the picture today, but when we were learning about our grief recovery method, it emphasizes the need for us to take at least 1% responsibility for our reaction in the present moment. That 1% represents a small part of us that feels hopeful about feeling better and our willingness to take new action to heal from our pain. If we don't accept at least 1% responsibility for our emotions, we get to stay in the prison. So we are encouraged, we know it takes courage to take that 1% responsibility and take a step towards healing. And so we're excited that we have a few things to offer you. We have our information night. So next Wednesday at 7, we're going to have information about our grief recovery method and just how you can get free from your prison, and how you can work through unresolved grief. Stronger Life Connections also is hosting an equine assisted learning event. So we're going to gather, we're going to connect with some people and some horses, and we're going to work on learn how to balance our life and just take that courage to connect. So that event also is this Saturday or this Friday night. So we'll put up information about that too. So, but we're so excited about being able to offer these resources. And we're not going to talk very much more. We're going to get to our guest. So yeah. Are we ready?
Yes, but before we invite Annette, please, if you're watching it during your lunch break, invite your friends, tell them to share. But also, I want to make it clear today that our conversation is going to be longer than usual. And the reason is, my friends, I said to Annette, we don't want to put a time limit because her wisdom is life changing. And if, let's say, you have to go back to work and your lunch break is over, we want to assure you that we are recording this and it will be on our podcast. And you can listen to the podcast later, maybe when you're driving, maybe when you're working. But I'm excited. We're just going to give Annette the stage to share. And before we bring her on, I'll let Darlene introduce her.
Okay, so Annette Stanwick is an author, speaker, freedom facilitator, and coach. She is no stranger to grief and loss. She has risen above trials, trauma, terror, and tragedy. Despite all those difficulties, is a confident, happy, and passionate woman. Positive choices, faith, and courage empower her to rise above the difficult situations. The most profound was the murder of her brother. Never could she have dreamed that she would publicly forgive her killers in the courtroom in the United States. As an author, speaker, and freedom facilitator and coach with a nursing background, decades of experience as a healthcare executive, and many years as a pastor's wife, she has a deep understanding of human behavior and a wealth of experience and wisdom that fuels her passion to help others regardless of their situation. She is a best-selling and award-winning author of Forgiveness, The Mystery, and Miracles. Let's welcome Annette.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Darlene and Jennifer, for inviting me to be part of this event today. I feel very privileged to be part of your month of courage that focuses, the focus of courage on your Grief Talk Cafe. And the reason that I'm so thrilled for this theme is because we need a boatload of courage. We need a boatload of courage when we look around us and see all that's going on around us and how many people are hurting and struggling from grief and loss. And it's not just about loss of life or loss of a loved one, but there are so many other losses that people are struggling with that are creating tons of emotion and pain and grief in their lives. Health issues, loss of life, financial problems, job losses, businesses going under. Of course, the pandemic has created a lot of things, but there are a lot of issues that people are struggling with aside from the pandemic. There's safety and security issues, betrayal, there's loss of possessions, and that list goes on and on. Depression, anxiety, families are struggling. Individuals are struggling. And you know what? None of us are immune. None of us are immune to being hurt or to hurting others or to experiencing losses in life. Some families are even struggling when someone in their family comes out and says that they're part of the LGBTQ community, or maybe that a loved one is in transition, in transgender transition. You know, people feel lost and they don't know how to cope with some of these issues. Some people are struggling to soothe and smother the pain that they're experiencing, and so they take to drinking and drugs, alcohol and drugs, that leads to an addiction. And just for your information, just this next week on Monday, I'm going to be speaking at a national addiction awareness event that Sutina is sponsoring. It's a private event for them, but because addiction, we need to be aware of what addiction does in our homes, in our lives. So that day I'm going to be speaking on finishing strong with courage. I put courage in there. Finish strong with courage, confidence, and compassion. Well, you know, in my work, I've come to understand that people are ultimately searching for two things in life. They're searching for happiness and they're searching for freedom from pain. And friends, I know because of the work that I do, the people that I serve, I know that courage, hope, prayer, positive choices, and forgiveness are the tools we need to overcome the struggles in our life. I'm going to say that again. Courage, hope, prayer, positive choices, and forgiveness are the tools we need to overcome life's struggles. When we struggle with grief and loss, our life, our emotions, our feelings can just be in a muddle. They're of confusion and being consumed, and our attitudes, everything just becomes clouded when we're experiencing grief and loss of any kind. And oh, I understand that so well because I've been through those struggles. But the one that comes to my mind that Darlene mentioned was, in the introduction, was the death of my brother Soren due to homicide. And you know, I was a mess after his death. I was a mess. When I went back to work, I couldn't get into my computer. I'd lost the passwords that I had used every day for years. I just wasn't doing well. But you know, 3 months before my brother's death, I went to a seminar entitled Choices, Adventures of a Lifetime. And I learned there that regardless of what happens in life, we always have a choice in how we respond. And so I thought about it, and I decided to make some positive choices. And these are the 3 choices I made. My first choice was that I wanted to be happy again. Will I ever be happy of my brother's death? No. But I knew that my brother would want me to be happy in spite of what had happened. My second choice was that I didn't want to be consumed. And you know, friends, when we're struggling with pain and emotions and grief and loss, we can be consumed. The third choice that I made was that I wanted to grow. Now, I had no idea where those choices would lead me, but I'll tell you, those choices have been so important throughout my life since my brother's death in 1999. And you know, it takes courage to reset your attitude. It takes courage to reset your attitude. You know, every year I choose a word that I want to focus on for the year. And this year, the word that I chose was courage. And I've got it written on a stone here. I've got it written on a stone. And oops, I'm sorry. I've got it written on a stone. Courage. And I've wanted my life to reflect courage throughout this year, in the things that I do, in the work that I do, in the contacts I make, in the conflicts that may come up. in the relationships, courage is important. And so I have that stone. I have it sitting on my desk right at the moment, but I also often have it on my bookcase because I challenge myself. So courage doesn't mean you won't be afraid. It just means that you won't allow fear to hold you back. And I think of that book by Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear, but Do It Anyway. Tremendous book, and I've recommended it so many times. You know, grief and loss and healing is different for everybody and in different situations. None of us heal at the same rate or in the same way because we have a different makeup. Our brains are different. We respond in different ways. And I'm going to give you an example. After my brother's death, and my brother's death occurred in 1999, we didn't know who had taken his life for a year and a half. And then when we finally found out that there were 5 people involved in my brother's death. Wow. In 2001, we found ourselves in the courtroom in Virginia because that's where my brother's death occurred. We found ourselves in the courtroom in Virginia, and I was presenting a victim impact statement. And I want to back up just a minute because I'm ordinarily not angry, but I was angry. For a year and a half, we didn't know who had done it. So I was trying to identify who could have done this, what kind of person. And I was in an angry episode one night in my bed, dreaming up all the qualities and characteristics of somebody who could have done this. And I was listing off angry, bitter, callous, deceitful, dangerous, evil, and the list went on. But right there, I heard a voice, and I've come to recognize that voice as the voice of God. And he called me by name. And he said, Annette, your brother's murderer is deeply wounded. I love your brother's murderer as much as I love you, and as much as I love your brother. Whoa. That really got my attention. I finally accepted it and fell asleep in peace. And the next morning when I told my husband, he saw the transformation that had happened to me overnight. And I call that my midnight miracle because I said, Clay, I hope the day will come when I can tell my brother's murderer how much he's loved by God. Then in 2001, we found ourselves in the courtroom in Virginia. And when the psychologist and social worker were on the witness stand, they talked about those 3 boys, but especially Travis, the one who had pulled the trigger. And they said he had been emotionally and physically abused by his father. He'd been left in poverty and shame and had been taught how to steal. And as the psychologist and social worker were sharing that story, suddenly those words that I'd heard in the middle of the night, your brother's murderer is deeply wounded, I realized, yes, the people that were involved in my brother's death, those 3 brothers, they were deeply wounded, and my heart opened with compassion. Well, I shared my victim impact statement. I'd spent a long time crafting it so that it depicted everything that my family and I had lost as a result of my brother's death. But then at the end of my victim impact statement, I said, Travis, God will never love what you've done, but I want you to know he loves you in spite of what you've done. And so I'm offering you God's love and forgiveness and my own forgiveness. Friends, that was such a transformational moment. 5 people went away to serve the rest of their lives in prison, but I came away a free woman. And it took grief and loss is different for everybody. And I healed right there that day on the witness stand. But then let's fast forward to 2018. We were back in the courtroom again in Virginia. And because the youngest of those three brothers was being resentenced due to some changes in the laws in the United States. And that day, three of us, my second brother and the niece, the daughter of my brother, along with myself, we all offered forgiveness. 19 years after Soren's death. Healing had happened. But then, just a month ago, in October of this year, we learned that Eugene, the oldest of the three brothers, died in prison. Don't know what the cause. But our youngest brother, after 22 years, informed us that he was finally able to release the anger and the bitterness and the resentment toward those who had taken Soren's life. He said, I'll forever miss Soren, but today I am free. The reason I tell you that story, it took 22 years for the three of us left in our family to be able to heal. And so there is no magic time or formula or method, because each of us have to process our grief and our loss ourselves. But I just encourage you to grab hold of the tools that are offered to you. You know, when life goes on after loss, life goes on after loss. And just a few weeks ago, a dear mother who'd lost her son in such a tragic way commented that there'd been an event in her community that she attended, and she'd lost her son just 3 years before. And she said the event, everybody around her was clapping and having fun and laughing. And I felt like they were being rude to me because I was there without my son and I was hurting so badly. Now, those people were not purposely being rude to her, but she was in her own bubble of grief and pain. And so she perceived that they were being rude because she wanted life to stop. Well, I too understand that. You know, shortly after my brother's death, after I went back to work, my office was on the 4th floor of the building where I worked. And one day I went out to the elevators and the elevator was slow. So I went over to the railing that looked way down 4 floors into the rotunda below. And there were people scurrying around. They were going into the kiosk for snacks and coffee, and some were sitting there having coffee together, and others were going off to doctor's appointments or to meetings in the building. And I grabbed that railing and I just wanted to shout, "Stop! Don't you know my brother has been murdered?" Friends, we want life to stop after our loss. But it doesn't. Life goes on. And people are not trying to be rude or unkind. Their life is going on. Well, my courage to heal happened on board my motorcycle. And one day, I loved putting on my leathers and chains and crawling on board my big, beautiful black motorcycle with lots of chrome and loud pipes. And we spent 12 to 14,000, 15,000 kilometers a summer riding on our motorcycles. And one day we were traveling up Highway to the Sun. And you have to imagine that when you ride that many kilometers, you have many hours of solitude. And in my choice to grow after my brother's death, I made the point that when I'm riding, I'm not going to focus on poor me and I'm down in the depths. I wanted to focus on positive qualities that I wanted more of in my life. And so I would choose a word that represented a quality that I wanted more of in my life. That day I chose courage. Number one, I needed courage to go up that mountain pass, to make those hairpin curves and to maneuver my big iron horse without, so that I was not in danger and so that I wouldn't careen off the side of the road. But I also wanted courage in my life, and I had no idea how much courage I would need. When we got to the top of the mountain pass, right at the summit of Highway to the Sun, there, high above, was this magnificent eagle soaring in the winds and the drafts and just enjoying it. But I heard a voice, and it was that voice of God's Spirit speaking to me again. And he said, if you wait on me, you will find new strength, and you will rise up on wings like eagles. That comes from the Bible, friends. It comes from Isaiah 40, verse 31. If you will wait on me, he was saying to me, wait on me, and you'll find new strength. You'll find courage that you need, and I will help you rise up on wings like eagles. Never dreaming the courage that I would need in the courtroom that day to face my brother's killer, to face the judge and the lawyers and the courtroom that was packed because it was a high-profile case. Also, the courage to say things that my family had no idea I was going to say when I offered God's love and forgiveness and my own forgiveness. And believe you me, I needed God's strength and courage that day. Friends, we need bold emotional courage to shake off the shackles of grief and pain and loss. And they can be like handcuffs that cuff us, that hold us tight to the painful stories. We need courage and bravery. And courage really means to have heart. We need to have a heart to do the hard things. We need courage to have those hard conversations. We need courage to fight for our lives and our relationships. We need courage to listen to each other's perspectives, because their perspective might be different than our assumptions. We need to have courage to have those end-of-life discussions. And friends, I really encourage, if you are facing an end-of-life situation with loved ones, have those discussions. Tell them how much you love them and how much you will miss them. Make amends. Be brave and courageous to apologize, but also to forgive. Some people just want to sweep things under the carpet, hoping that they'll just disappear. I want to tell you a story. We were living on a ranch, and the gal, another family that lived right just across the road from us, she would come over to my house every morning about 10 or 10:30. And when she'd come in, she'd say, Annette, how can you have your house so immaculate at 10:30 in the morning and your dishes are all done? And I said, well, before I go to bed at night, I make sure everything is tidy so that when I wake up in the morning, I don't have a house to clean. And then as soon as we finish breakfast, I put dishes in the dishwasher. Well, she said, you're hiding your dishes. I said, well, I'm just putting them in there to save up till we have a few more dishes. I'm not hiding them, but I'm cleaning up my kitchen. Well, a couple of weeks later, she and her husband invited us to come to their place. Her husband wanted to show us some slides of some special places they'd been. And when we went into the house, I said, oh, Donna, your kitchen looks wonderful. There were no dirty dishes, because she hated doing dishes. All the dishes were cleared away. The countertops were clean and shiny. And when I commented, she said, well, I want to show you. And she stepped back and opened the cupboard doors underneath the sink. And there, I couldn't believe what I saw. There were stacks and stacks and stacks of dirty dishes. She'd put them down there hoping that they would just go away, rather than spending time organizing and stacking and putting them under the sink. If she'd spent that same amount of time, she could have done the dishes. But then when we went to watch the slides, her husband moved a chair in the living room so we could all face the screen. And would you believe, when he moved the chair, and her house looked really nice and tidy and clean, when he moved the chair, underneath the chair was a huge mound of dirt and dust bunnies. Rather than take the dustpan and sweep them up, she had just shoved the dirt under the chair, hoping that no one would notice. Well, friends, we shouldn't just sweep issues under the carpet. Have the courage to deal with them. Have the courage to face those issues. My dad modeled courage. He modeled bravery and confidence as his role as a father, as a farmer, rancher, as a community leader, and as an elected official in the state of Idaho. He was a tremendous role model. I ask you, what are you modeling for your family in relation to courage? In relation to the courage to forgive and let go or have compassion? Reminds me of a story a mom told me a few years ago, took me aside. Josh was her son, and Josh was in his early 20s. He and his best friend were cruising Calgary one Saturday night, and unfortunately, they'd been drinking. They were involved in a very serious accident, and Josh's best friend was killed. What a tragic thing. When they went to the funeral, Josh went up to the father of his very best friend, and he said, I am so sorry. And his best friend's father said, Josh, I will never forgive you for what you did to my son. Did Josh do that on purpose? No. Of course it was stupid to be driving under the influence of alcohol. Josh spent a couple of years in jail. When he got out, his parents saw to it that he had the best therapists. And he seemed to be doing really well. In fact, he had a girlfriend and he got engaged. But 4 months after the engagement, Josh died by suicide. That's not the end of the story. 3 months later, the father of his best friend ended his life by suicide. Such a tragic story. Josh's mom said, Annette, if only there had been just a small amount of courage, at least 2 people could still be alive today. If only that dad had had the courage to show some compassion and to listen to Josh's sincere apology. What are you role modeling for your family? You know, I've developed a formula that I think might help. I call it the ACEs. ACEs. To ace something means to overcome or defeat something. And so I want to help you ace the dark shadows of grief and loss that you might be in. You see, grief and loss creates dark shadows. And those dark shadows that we live in when we've experienced a loss, a tragedy, other losses, when we're experiencing grief, or all of these things that we've been talking about earlier, and that Jennifer and Darlene talk about. in their at Stronger Life Connections, and in their Grief Talk Cafe, and in their on their website, Stronger Life Connections, stronger-lifeconnections.com. There's a lot of darkness, dark shadows that people get stuck in. And so I'm here to inspire you and encourage you and uplift you and help you to overcome and to ace those dark shadows. And so if you have a piece of paper in front of you, write down the word ACEs down the left side of the paper. ACES. ACEs. Because I want to help you ace the situation, the dark shadows, the situation that you are facing in your life. The A stands for acknowledge that you're living in a dark shadow of grief or loss. C stands for confront the issues. That means to name the issues. You know, when I did created the victim impact statement for the sentencing of my brother's murderer, one of the murderers, I listed all the things that we had lost as a family by his death. And I encourage you to make that list and then let yourself make it an extensive list, because we can heal from those things that we name. The E of ACEs stands for embrace. Embrace means to face the situation with honesty, vulnerability, and transparency. Take hold of them and be determined to overcome them, rather than to deny they exist or to sweep them under the carpet. Embrace means to do the hard stuff. And friends, I promise you that if you'll do the hard stuff, you can heal. You can find freedom and peace. And the S of ACEs stands for step out of the shadow of grief and loss by making positive choices to heal and grow. We need courage, friends. We need courage. We need courage to claw our way out of grief or loss. And I ordered this crab on the website, on the web the other day. You know, if you see a bunch of crabs in a bucket or a crate or a fishing net, they are trying to crawl their way out. And they use their claws, they use their legs, and they just are trying to claw their way out. And they may be just about over the top, and another crab grabs hold of them and pulls them back. Friends, we need courage to claw our way out of grief and loss. We need courage to grab hold of the possibility that we can heal. We need courage to face our issues and to get help to heal. We need courage to have compassion for ourselves and for others. But we also need courage to choose happiness. To choose happiness. Don't let the shadows of life and grief and loss prevent you from stepping into the light of God's love, strength, and courage. Courage is your most valuable asset. Grief, as I've said before, grief and loss is a dark place, and it may be scary and full of painful thoughts and memories and even traps and emotions and relationships. Just last night, I was meeting with a group of women, and I was telling them what I was going to be doing today and what I was going to be talking about. And one of the women in that group had just lost her own brother 3 weeks ago. due to ALS. And she was relieved that he was no longer suffering this dreaded disease. And then, bang, last week, her bird died. And the death of that bird catapulted her into the grief of losing her brother. And she sat and wept for 2 solid days. But she said, Annette, what you're saying about the dark, she said, I believe I've come out into the light after spending 2 days crying. But she said, then I go back into the dark place about this relative of mine and this person in my life, and they're dark. Their lives are dark, and I have to deal with them. But she said, what you're telling me is that I can make a positive choice. I don't have to stay in that dark shadow. And right then and there, she pulled herself out of those dark shadows. That was as late as last night, friends. And I'm saying that to give you hope, to give you hope. It takes courage to step out of the shadows of grief and loss. But I encourage you to believe in yourself. Believe in yourself and your ability to move beyond the pain, the grief, and the darkness of your shadows. What would your loved one want? I ask this many times when I am coaching people in relation to their grief and loss. And 10 times out of 10, they will say to me, well, they would want me to be happy. Does that mean they want you to be happy about that they're gone? Absolutely not. But they want you to be happy in spite of having lost them. Yeah. Friends, use your bold emotional courage to step out of the shadows and into the light with a brave heart, with strength, and with courage. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Annette, sharing your story and your wisdom. Yeah. Again, when we have courage, even to take that 1%, that one step towards healing or towards making a different mindset, like choosing to get healing, choosing to just make that phone call. When we can start with that 1%, yeah, it can make a difference.
It can make such a difference. I'm a living example of taking steps, never dreaming where my life would go. I mean, the things that I do today, that my husband and I do today, I never dreamed that we could do. Mm-hmm. But it came because God gave me the courage to do what I needed to do to take that step.
Oh, Annette. I took so many notes and I was trying to keep up and boatload. When you said we need boatload of courage,
yes,
and then you listed all the losses we're dealing with, especially today, I can see why you said we need a boatload. I just want to say thank you so much. You gave us you gave us all the nuggets we need. You gave us the aces. I want to write it on my mirror. And if you give us permission, we're going to share again about aces, because that is so good. That's the tools. And every day, Annette, as you know, at Grief Talk, Darlene and I share about lessons learned in life and loss. And we have learned so much from you today, and we'll forever be grateful.
Thank you.
For our friends who joined us today, please remember, this conversation is going to be on podcast. I would love us to share this conversation, because anybody who would listen their lives will be changed, because we all realize today we need a boatload of courage, and Annette just showed us how to do that. Thank you, Annette. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my privilege to be here.
Yes. And what a nice way to close. What a beautiful way to close the month of November, the power of courage. It has changed our lives. We've learned so much. And thank you for all our guests who participated in this month of the power of courage. And now we have a boatload because we know we need a boatload of courage, and we know from Annette what we need. So tune in. If you missed this, let's share with our friends. Let's spread the word because we all can learn from today's session. Until next Wednesday, I wish you all a boatload of courage.